It was late afternoon when the young customer stepped inside the bank, brushing dust off his sleeves as he waited for the automatic doors to close behind him. The day had been long, and his clothes showed it. He had spent the morning helping a neighbor paint a garage for a little extra cash. The paint stains on his shirt had dried into rough patches, and a faint smell of fresh paint still followed him. He didn't mind it. Honest work never bothered him. But the moment he entered the bank, he could feel eyes turn toward him. The lobby was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes with polished floors, reflective counters, and air conditioning that hums like a distant machine. A few customers stood in line, most looking down at their phones. A security guard sat near the entrance but hardly looked up. Behind the counter, the bank staff moved around in steady rhythm, tapping keyboards and calling the next person in line. At the center of it all stood the bank manager. He was a tall man with a sharp posture. Dressed in a dark suit that looked like it had never seen a wrinkle, his hair was neatly combed, and his tie was perfectly centered. He carried a sense of authority, or at least he wanted people to think so. Whenever he walked from one side of the counter to the other, he moved with a kind of pride that made it seem like the entire bank belonged to him. The young customer, let's call him Aaron, walked up to the line quietly. He didn't try to attract any attention. All he needed was help checking a small issue with his account. Nothing major, nothing complicated, just a simple request, but the bank manager noticed him immediately. It wasn't subtle. The man's eyes scanned Aaron from head to toe, the worn-out shoes, the old backpack hanging loosely from one shoulder, the dried paint on his shirt. The manager raised one eyebrow like he had just spotted something out of place. Then he turned to one of the employees beside him. Leaning slightly closer, Aaron didn't hear what he whispered, but the employee's quick smirk made it obvious it wasn't something kind. Aaron kept his eyes forward. He didn't want trouble. He'd been treated this way before by store clerks, by bus drivers, even by people who didn't know a thing about him. It never felt good, but he had learned to ignore it. He had bigger things to focus on. When the line finally moved, Aaron stepped forward. The manager, instead of letting one of the tellers assist, walked to the counter himself, as if he needed to be in control of this particular interaction. Next, the manager said, not even trying to hide the impatience in his voice. Aaron approached with a small nod. Hi, I just wanted to check something with my account. I think there might have been a mistake with the deposit. The manager didn't reply right away. Instead, he looked at Aaron as though he was trying to decide if he should even bother helping. A mistake with a deposit? The manager repeated, as if the idea itself was amusing. Yes, Aaron said calmly. I just want to check the balance. That's all. The manager let out a light, sarcastic laugh. Not loud, but loud enough for a couple of people in line to hear. All right then, he said. Let's see what we can find on your account. Do you have your card? Aaron handed it over. The manager took it carefully, not in the respectful way someone handles another person's property, but like he was afraid the card might be dirty. He held it between two fingers, turned toward the computer, and began typing as he typed. He made no effort to lower his voice. You know, he said, eyes still on the screen, most people your age don't really have much going on in their accounts. Lots of small deposits, lots of tiny withdrawals. Nothing unusual, he chuckled again. But we can check yours anyway, just in case. Aaron stayed quiet. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't make things worse. Even the customers behind him shifted with discomfort, but no one stepped forward. It was easier to pretend they didn't hear. The manager continued typing slowly, tapping each key like he was in no rush at all. His body language screamed arrogance. He stood tall, shoulders back, chin slightly raised. He didn't care who heard him or how he sounded. You'd be surprised how many kids come in here thinking they're dealing with thousands, he said, laughing to himself again. Then the account shows something like $4 and some coins. Happens all the time. Aaron's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. I don't think that's the case here. I just need to check something. The manager turned toward him, eyes narrowing in amusement. Of course, we'll take a look. No need to get nervous. Aaron wasn't nervous. He was simply tired of being judged by appearances, tired of explaining himself, tired of being talked down to. He knew why he looked the way he did today. He knew what he had been through the past few months. And he knew that none of it gave anyone the right to treat him like he didn't matter. But the manager didn't know any of that. Or maybe he didn't care. When the computer asked for another form of verification, the manager rolled his eyes dramatically.
Not really.
He muttered. This system must think you're some kind of special case. Aaron stayed quiet again, while the manager continued in a mocking tone. Let's see what makes your account so complicated today. Customers behind Aaron exchanged glances. They could see the imbalance between the 2-1 man using his position to talk down to someone who had done nothing wrong. Aaron's fingers tapped lightly against his leg. Not out of annoyance more, like he was trying to let the seconds pass without letting irritation settle in. He wasn't here to prove anything. He just wanted clarity about his account. The manager typed in another code, then another. He sighed loudly, as if Aaron was personally responsible for the extra steps. You know, the manager said, turning his head slightly to speak to another employee, some people really need to learn to manage their money better. They come in here with no idea what they're doing. The employee glanced at Aaron and then quickly looked away. Aaron heard the comment, of course. But he didn't react, because deep down, he knew something the manager didn't. He knew that the balance the manager was mocking may not be small at all. He knew the reason he had come. He knew this wasn't going to end the way the manager expected. But for now, he let the man talk. Another moment passed before the manager finally said, "All right, let's see what your account has for us today." He clicked the final button. The system froze for a second. The manager frowned. What's this? Why is it asking for a different clearance level? He said quietly. More to himself than to anyone else, Aaron watched him, staying still. Knowing this was only the beginning, he could see the manager's confidence flicker for the first time. The moment the computer asked for a different clearance level, the manager's eyebrows pinched together, forming a thin line on his forehead. He leaned closer to the screen, as if staring hard enough would make the message disappear. It didn't. The computer stayed frozen on the same prompt, waiting for the correct authorization, for the first time since Aaron walked into the bank. The manager didn't look confident. He wasn't smirking, he wasn't whispering to anyone, and he wasn't laughing under his breath. He was quiet, almost too quiet. Aaron stood still, watching from the other side of the counter. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The silence between them grew heavier by the second. The customers behind Aaron started paying more attention now. At first, they had been minding their own business, scrolling on their phones, or waiting for their turn. But it wasn't every day that a bank manager's confidence suddenly cracked in front of everyone. One older man leaned slightly to the side to get a better look. A woman behind him whispered to her friend, confused about what was taking so long. The security guard by the door even tilted his head, sensing something had shifted, but the manager didn't notice any of them. His eyes stayed glued to the computer, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "This is unusual," he muttered at last. His voice was lower now, stripped of the arrogance it had carried only minutes earlier. He clicked a few more times, as if trying to fix the issue himself. But each click brought up the same message. Manager-level clearance required. Call regional office for verification. He swallowed, and for a brief moment, he glanced at Aaron, not with mockery this time, but with confusion. "I'm going to need to verify something," he said. Trying to recover his professional tone, Aaron nodded calmly. "That's fine." The manager turned away from the counter and walked to a small office behind the main desk. He didn't call anyone else to take over. He didn't even tell Aaron how long it might take. He simply walked away because he had to. Through the glass window of the office, everyone could see him pick up the phone. He spoke quickly, nervously, and kept glancing toward the lobby. His shoulders were stiff. He kept adjusting his tie. His fingers tapped the desk over and over. Aaron stayed where he was, while the manager was on the phone. One of the tellers approached Aaron gently. "Is everything okay?" she asked quietly. Aaron offered a small smile. "Yes, just a little mix-up, I think." She nodded, though she didn't look convinced. "He's usually not like this," she whispered, glancing toward the office. "Or maybe he is, but he's not usually this ... flustered." Aaron didn't respond to that. He didn't want to speak badly about anyone, even if the manager's behavior had been disrespectful. After a minute or two, the manager returned. His forehead was slightly shiny, like he had wiped sweat off it. His eyes didn't carry the same superior look anymore. "All right," he said, clearing his throat. "I've received the clearance to continue. The system needed an extra confirmation. It's just protocol." But even he didn't sound convinced by his own explanation. He sat back down at the computer. His posture was different now, a little smaller, a little less rigid. His fingers trembled slightly as he typed in the authorization code given by the regional office. He pressed Enter. The screen took a moment to load. Soft loading circles spun slowly in the corner of the monitor. The silence in the lobby grew deeper. No one moved. Even the air felt still. The manager leaned forward. The screen refreshed. And whatever he said wasn't what he expected. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. His shoulders froze. The color in his face changed, draining little by little. He blinked once, twice, then leaned back in his chair as if someone had pushed him. Aaron watched. His expression calm, but inside he could feel the shift happening. The moment he knew would come eventually had finally arrived. The manager stared at the screen, then at Aaron, then back at the screen. He didn't speak. He couldn't speak. His voice had abandoned him. He scrolled down, eyes darting rapidly as he read through the numbers and details on the account. His hand covered his mouth. A small gasp escaped him, not dramatic, but loud enough for the nearest customers to hear. "Everything okay?" Aaron asked gently. The manager didn't answer right away. Looked like someone had just shown him a secret he wasn't supposed to see. "This," the manager whispered finally. "This can't be right." But it was. Aaron knew it was. He had been waiting weeks for this confirmation. Weeks of paperwork, phone calls, meetings, and conversations he wished he'd never had to go through. Weeks of explaining things to people who couldn't relate, and weeks of holding on to patience when everything felt overwhelming. The manager's fingers hovered above the keyboard again, unsure of what to press. "I'm going to double-check this," he said softly, almost apologetically. He typed a few more commands, trying every possible way to confirm what he was seeing. The numbers didn't change. The account details stayed the same. The balance stayed the same. The customers behind. Aaron now fully understood something unusual was happening. Quiet buzz circled through the line. People shifted to get a better look. The security guard took a step forward, not out of concern but curiosity. "Sir," the manager finally whispered, looking at Aaron in a new light, one filled with uncertainty and something close to respect. "Is this really your account?" Aaron nodded. "Yes." The manager swallowed again. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the monitor a little. Not enough for others to see, but enough to show Aaron he wasn't imagining things. Aaron glanced at the screen. There it was. The balance. The final confirmation. It was a large amount, larger than anything the manager had expected. Large enough to explain why the regional office had to unlock the account. Large enough to erase every assumption the manager had made since the moment Aaron walked through the door. The manager stared at Aaron as if seeing him for the first time. Realizing that everything he had said earlier, every sarcastic comment, every rude remark had been aimed at someone he should have treated with respect from the start. The room stayed silent. Waiting. The manager finally spoke, but his voice was different now, softer. "Careful, sir. I apologize for the delay. Please give me a moment to update your record," his words. Once sharp and full of authority, now sounded unsteady. Aaron simply nodded, because he knew the story wasn't over yet. The manager sat frozen behind the counter, still trying to process what he had just seen on the screen. His hands were resting on the keyboard, but he wasn't typing. He wasn't speaking. He wasn't even breathing normally. It was as if the number on the monitor had taken all the confidence out of him. Aaron stood quietly on the other side. He didn't gloat, didn't smirk, and didn't say anything to make the manager feel worse. He wasn't that kind of person. He just waited, letting the moment settle. A few customers shifted in line, trying to understand what had changed so suddenly. The older man who had been leaning earlier now stood with his arms crossed, ready to witness whatever happened next. The woman near the back whispered to the person beside her again, this time with even more curiosity. But Aaron didn't focus on any of them. His eyes remained on the counter, calm and patient. After a long moment, the manager finally straightened himself and cleared his throat. The sound was weak, like he was afraid his own voice might crack. I need to double-check something, he said. Though he had already checked everything twice, he clicked through the account again, clicking slowly this time, almost respectfully. His movements were careful now, nothing like the rushed, sarcastic typing he'd done earlier. Aaron nodded gently. Take your time, those simple words spoken in a calm voice. Did the manager look up with an expression he hadn't shown before, one that almost looked like guilt? He clicked through another verification page. The numbers stayed the same. The account stayed the same. The details stayed the same. There was no mistake. The manager swallowed and sat back. This is significant. Aaron stayed quiet. The manager tapped the desk lightly, trying to steady himself. And you said you were expecting this? Aaron nodded. Yes, I just needed to confirm it. The manager exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He looked nothing like the man who had mocked Aaron only minutes earlier. The arrogance was gone, replaced with uncertainty. He looked at Aaron with new eyes now, almost careful, almost apologetic. What would you like to do next? He asked. Aaron didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked down at the counter, thinking. He had known this moment would come for some time, but seeing it for himself made everything feel heavier. While he was thinking, the teller from earlier approached the manager. Do you need help with anything? She asked in a soft voice. The manager shook his head a little too quickly, but the tremble in his voice gave him away. She gave Aaron a warm, understanding smile before stepping back. It was small, but it meant something, especially after the way the manager had behaved. Aaron finally spoke. I just wanted to check my account today, that's all. The manager nodded slowly. Of course, he paused, not sure how to continue. If you'd like, we can offer you a private banking room, or I can assign a personal representative for you. Or there's no need, Aaron said gently. I didn't come here for special treatment. The manager's expression tightened, as if he had been hoping to make up for his behavior. But Aaron wasn't interested in making him uncomfortable. I only wanted the confirmation, Aaron repeated kindly. The customers behind them pretended not to listen, but they were absolutely listening. Aaron adjusted the strap on his backpack, the faded fabric sliding smoothly over his shoulder. The backpack didn't look like something that belonged to someone with the kind of balance the manager had just seen. But that was the point. Appearances didn't tell anyone's story. The manager clicked something else on the screen. His movement slower and more respectful now. I'll print a record for you, he said quietly. Thank you. As the small printer beside him began to shake and buzz, the manager leaned back in his chair. He seemed deep in thought, as if replaying everything he had said earlier. You work hard, the manager said suddenly, surprising even himself. Aaron blinked. Sorry, I shouldn't have assumed anything. He looked down at his hands. It wasn't fair of me. Aaron didn't respond right away. He could have said a lot in that moment. He could have reminded the manager of everything he had said, everything he had implied, everything he had whispered. But he didn't. Because that wasn't why he was here. He finally said, sometimes people don't look like what they're going through, what they have. The manager looked up, startled by how calm and gentle Aaron's words were. That's very true, he whispered. The printer beeped, pulling both of their attention. The manager grabbed the paper and handed it to Aaron with both hands, almost like it was something fragile. Your updated balance, he said, carefully. Aaron took the paper. He folded it once, then slipped it into his backpack calmly. The customers behind him pretended to look away, even though their curiosity was nearly visible. Aaron took a breath. Thank you for your help today. The manager opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out right away. Finally managed, of course. And, once again, I apologize for earlier. Aaron gave a polite nod. It's all right, just be kind to people. Everyone's dealing with something. The manager stared at him, realizing something important. Respect wasn't something you gave only to people who seemed important. It was something you gave to everyone. Aaron stepped back from the counter, but before he could walk away, the older man from the line spoke up. "You handled that well, young man," he said gently. Aaron offered a small smile. "Thank you." Then he turned and began walking toward the exit. The security guard nodded at him as he passed, a small gesture of respect that hadn't been there earlier. As Aaron pushed open the glass door, sunlight spilled onto his face. The air outside was warm and soft, a gentle reminder that the world was bigger than any moment of embarrassment or judgment. But the story wasn't over, because the manager still stood behind the counter, staring at the door long after Aaron was gone, and he wasn't the same person he had been before. The moment Aaron stepped out of the bank, the warm sunlight met him like a gentle welcome. He paused for a second, taking a slow breath, as if he needed to separate the outside world from what had just happened inside. He wasn't angry, not even disappointed, just thoughtful. Moments like that had a strange way of sitting with a person, trying to teach them something, whether they asked for it or not. But inside the bank, things were far from calm. The manager stood frozen behind the counter long after Aaron had left the building. He stared at the door as if expecting him to walk back in. His thoughts ran in circles. His chest felt tight, not from embarrassment alone, but from a deep realization that he had judged someone without reason. He didn't notice the customers watching him. He didn't notice the teller looking at him with a mix of confusion and disappointment. Everything inside him felt heavy. Finally, the teller stepped closer. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. The manager blinked, snapping out of the daze. "I'm fine," he said a little too quickly, but he wasn't. Everyone could see it. The teller hesitated before speaking. "You know, he was really patient with you. After everything you said." The manager looked down, his fingers tightening slightly on the edge of the counter. "I know," he whispered. The older man from the line stepped up next, placing his hand on the counter. "Son, sometimes we get so used to looking at people from the outside that we forget they have whole stories we know nothing about." The manager didn't argue. He didn't make excuses. He just nodded slowly. Meanwhile, Aaron walked down the sidewalk, not in a rush, not bothered by anything around him. He stopped at a small bench near a bus stop and sat down. Cars passed by, people walked in groups, and a soft breeze brushed his face. It was peaceful. He pulled the folded paper from his backpack, the printed record of his account. For a moment he just held it, not opening it, just feeling its weight. It wasn't the paper that mattered. It was what the paper had represented for months. He finally unfolded it. The balance glowed under the sunlight. A large sum. A life-changing amount. Aaron closed his eyes. Thinking back to his brother, he remembered the long nights when his brother worked on the small tech idea that eventually grew into something powerful. He remembered how passionate he was, how hopeful, how determined. Aaron had never expected to play a part in that legacy, but life had turned in ways no one could predict. He smiled softly at the memory before folding the paper again. Inside the bank, the manager still couldn't shake the guilt. He walked into his office, closed the door, and leaned against it. His face felt warm, and he pressed his hands over his eyes. He wasn't a bad person. At least he didn't think he was. But that moment had shown him something about himself that he didn't like. He had allowed himself to assume, to judge, to belittle. He sat at his desk and exhaled slowly. The teller knocked lightly on the door before stepping inside. "I'm not trying to make you feel worse," she said softly, "but you should learn from this. That young man didn't deserve any of what you said." The manager nodded. "I know," and he was so calm. "More calm than I deserved." "That's what makes it harder, doesn't it?" she said with a small smile. He gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Yeah, it does." A silence lingered between them, soft, not uncomfortable. "You should take a moment," she suggested before leaving. The manager stayed seated. Second by second, he let the realization settle deeper. He couldn't undo what he'd said, but he could change what he did next. Back outside, Aaron checked the time on his phone. The bus was still 10 minutes away. He leaned back on the bench, watching people passing by. A little girl nearby dropped her ice cream, and her face crumpled with disappointment. Her mother bent down, comforting her with a gentle voice. Aaron smiled at the scene. Life was full of small moments, good ones, bad ones, surprising ones, and sometimes the smallest moments taught the biggest lessons. He thought about the manager again, with anger but with understanding. He had seen people like that before, people who carried their stress like a shield and let it affect how they treated others. But Aaron didn't let moments like that harden him. He had promised himself long ago that he wouldn't become someone who judged others. Based on surface-level things, he understood struggle. He understood loss. He understood patience. Those things taught him to look deeper. Back in the bank, the manager picked up the phone and dialed the regional office again. When the person on the other end answered, he said, "I need to update something on a client account, and I want to handle it properly." His voice was steady, now not proud, not arrogant, but sincere. After the call, he stepped out of the office and looked around the lobby. Things were back to normal. Customers talking quietly, workers moving behind the counter, the security guard standing by the door. But for him, everything felt different. He noticed how each customer carried something invisible, a worry, a responsibility, a story. He had seen all those people before. He had never really seen them. He took a deep breath. Meanwhile, Aaron's bus arrived. He stood up, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and stepped onto the bus with an easy smile. The seats were mostly empty, and he chose one near the window as the bus pulled away from the stop. He watched the bank shrink into the distance. He didn't know that inside, the manager was still thinking about him. He didn't know that his calmness had made such an impact. He didn't know that his quiet strength had taught someone an important lesson. All he knew was that life had changed for him. That change was just beginning, back in the bank. The teller approached the manager once more. "You're thinking a lot," she said with a gentle laugh. "I am," he admitted. "I needed it." "Good," she said. "Everyone needs a reminder sometimes." And with that, she returned to her work. The manager looked toward the door one last time, almost wishing he could apologize again, but knowing Aaron was probably long gone. Still, he promised himself silently. The next person he saw walk through those doors, no matter their clothes, no matter their background, no matter their situation, he would treat them with respect, because he finally understood that kindness wasn't about who someone seemed to be, it was about who he chose to be. The morning air outside the bank felt cool, almost fresh enough to clear the heavy thoughts running through the young customer's mind as he walked toward the building again. It had been a long few days, filled with tension, confusion, and memories he hadn't expected to face. But now things felt different. The truth had come out. The bank manager had faced the reality of what he did. And the story of the huge account balance was no longer a burden he had to hide. Still, even with all of that, he didn't feel like someone who had suddenly become important. He felt like the same quiet young man who preferred to keep to himself and avoid attention. Yet life had pushed him into a moment that demanded he stand up for himself, not by shouting or fighting, but simply by letting the truth speak. As he reached the bank doors, he didn't know what exactly he was walking into. He only knew he needed closure. Not revenge, not drama, just some peace. Inside, the bank seemed calmer than usual. People stood in short lines, some filling out forms, some typing on their phones. The man who had embarrassed him, the manager, was at his desk again, but his posture said everything. His usual stiff confidence was gone. His eyes looked heavy and every movement seemed careful, like he was trying not to break anything else around him. When the manager noticed him, he froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. The young customer stood with his hands in his pockets, unsure what to say. The manager sat still, unsure whether to stand, hide, or pretend he didn't exist. Eventually, the manager forced himself to rise. He walked over slowly, every step looking like it took effort. The fear of losing his job wasn't the only thing weighing on him. His guilt was heavier. "Thank you for coming back," he said quietly, his voice nothing like the loud, dismissive tone he had used before. "I wasn't sure if you would." The young man nodded. "I just needed to finish all the paperwork and understand everything about the account. And we should talk." The manager swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, we should." The conversation didn't start in a private room or behind a desk. They both stepped to the side of the lobby, far enough from people but still visible. Nothing about this needed to be hidden. "I owe you an apology," the manager said. "A real one. Not the scripted one I gave you that day. I judged you the second I saw you. I assumed things that were wrong. And I treated you in a way no customer should be treated, no person should be treated." He paused. "I am truly sorry." The words hung in the air. The young man didn't reply right away. He wasn't used to being spoken to like this, especially by someone who once made him feel small. "You hurt me," he finally said, his voice soft but steady. "You made me feel like I didn't belong here, like I was wasting your time, like I was lying. All because of how I looked, or what you thought about someone like me." He didn't raise his voice or point fingers. He didn't need to. His calm honesty carried more weight than anger ever could. The manager nodded, eyes down. "I know, and I regret it more than you think. I've been in this job a long time, but it took one mistake to show me how wrong I've been acting for years." There was something almost painful in his voice, not because he wanted pity, but because he was genuinely facing a truth he couldn't run from. When the balance showed up, the manager continued, "I felt shock, but I also felt ashamed. Not because of the money, but because it exposed how unfair I had been. You didn't owe me anything, yet you stayed calm when I didn't deserve it." He paused. "You had more dignity than I did in that moment." Those words touched the young man in a way he didn't expect. He had come for closure, but hearing someone take responsibility like that openly fully brought a sense of relief he didn't know he needed. "It wasn't about the money," the young man said. "I don't want people to treat me well only because I have something to my name. I just want to be treated with respect, like anyone else. Like a normal person walking into a bank." The manager ran a hand over his face and nodded. "You're right, and you deserve that." After a pause, he added, "I've taken steps to fix things. Training. Policy changes. I need to learn, and I want others here to learn too." The young man nodded again. "That's good. It'll help a lot of people who feel the way I did that day." He shifted a little, then added, "I'm not here to get you fired. I don't want to ruin your life. I just want things to change." The manager looked up at him, surprised. "You're giving me a chance?" "Everyone makes mistakes," he said quietly. "But not everyone admits them. You did. That means something." For the first time, the manager's eyes softened. Not with relief, though there was some of that, but with a kind of respect he hadn't shown anyone before. "Thank you," he said. "You didn't have to say that." The young man nodded and stepped back. "I should get the paperwork done now. I have a lot to learn about the account, too." "Of course," the manager said quickly. "You'll have all the help you need. And I'll make sure everything is explained clearly." He hesitated, then added, "You deserve to feel comfortable here." The young man didn't smile, but something in his expression relaxed. "That's enough for me." He walked to the service desk, not with the fear he had felt before, but with calm. The staff greeted him politely, genuinely. Not because of the money, not because of his story, but because the atmosphere had changed. People whispered softly, curious, but not rude. Some had seen what happened that day. Others had just heard bits and pieces. But everyone seemed to understand that something meaningful had taken place. As he filled out forms and asked questions, he noticed something unexpected. The manager didn't hide in his office. Instead, he stayed nearby, helping other customers with patience he didn't seem to have before. His tone was softer, his posture less rigid. It was like he had changed overnight, but the young man knew change didn't happen that fast. This was years of behavior being challenged all at once. When everything was done, the young man stepped outside again. The sky seemed a little brighter, even though it was the same sky as before. He walked slowly, not in a hurry, just letting the moment settle. He thought of his parents and everything they had built. He thought of the long hours, the sacrifices, the quiet plans they had kept hidden until he was ready. It wasn't the money that made him emotional, it was the love behind it. But today wasn't just about the account. It was about being seen for who he really was, and standing up for himself without raising his voice or causing harm. A gentle breeze moved past him, brushing against his face. He took a deep breath. This chapter of his life was closing not with anger, but with understanding, even though the manager had hurt him. Both of them had walked away better than before. Sometimes, he thought, life gives you moments not to break you, but to show you how strong you are. And as he walked home, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace.